I've been around Hugh Freeze once or twice down there in interviews. He doesn't really look like he wants to be there. I know that sounds like a bold statement, but I mean, there's something going on with him. I mean, at least act like you want the job. I mean, show some emotion.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. We're grateful to you for coming to us here to talk some college ball. Like we do every week on our Wednesday show, we are having a guest on. And today, given the fact that the SEC currently occupies 6 of the top 7 in the AP poll, we felt like it was appropriate to bring on Paul Finebaum of the SEC Network. We're going to discuss with him what's going on at Florida, what's going on at Auburn. We will also get outside the footprint a little bit as well. We'll talk about Bama and Wisconsin matchup. We'll talk about Notre Dame. How do they get back on track? Then we'll talk about Florida State as well. So a lot that we'll get to with Paul Finebaum today on Always College Football. We also, at the end of the show, we're going to talk about our top 4 in the Power 4. So our top 4 teams in each league in the Power 4. So top 4 in the SEC, Big 10, ACC, and Big 12. So we'll give you those as well. So let's not put off any additional time. Let's dive into our conversation with Paul Finebaum. Well, we welcome him in now. He's Paul Finebaum, the mouth of the South, the voice of the SEC, the mayhem master, as some have referred to him, as a guy that likes to create it and then somehow put it out. I don't know how, but he does it. He's Paul Finebaum. You can see him on the Paul Finebaum Show every single day on the SEC Network. You can also see him on SEC Nation on Saturday mornings and throughout the week on various ESPN programs. Paul, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing great. Greg, I saw you from a distance Saturday. Didn't get a chance to talk because of all the security people around you in Lexington, but hello.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, Paul. It was the security folks in Lexington. They're very concerned about you getting too close, and I think that's a justifiable and understandable reasoning. Looking at this kind of the slate, first of all, it's a little underwhelming. Just being honest, a little underwhelming with some of the matchups that we've had in the first couple weeks of the season in the SEC. Now we've had a few SC LSU, Georgia, Clemson, a couple others that have Miami, Florida, but for the most part, most of the teams haven't really tested themselves yet. So what do you make of just college football's scheduling model right now as it currently exists?
It seems very much spread out, and I think that's for the most obvious reason, Greg, the additional bye week. But it does. I mean, you look at the list this week, and I mean, it's hard to find a defining game. I mean, you might go out west for some really intriguing games. The SEC doesn't have what I would call a great game, and I just think it's. I don't really know why. I thought it would get better, frankly, with additional schools, but I think it's just we just have an extra week to kill, and I think that's the issue.
Well, at some point, I know that more and more Power 5 matchups will be scheduled and it'll get better for sure in the future. But it just, for me, I love the sport no matter what. I think you'll be watching, I'll be watching. I'm just curious, how you think it can get fixed. But looking at some of the matchups that do have a chance to move the needle, Florida and Texas A&M. Billy Napier in a difficult spot. Now there's questions about who he should start at quarterback. It's a challenge nonetheless. Must-win situation, it feels like. So when we look back at what happens this weekend with Florida, you guys will be there for SEC Nation. What do you think people are going to say and remember about this potential performance?
Well, I think must-win is really an understatement. Should Billy Napier fail to win this game and Florida loses, again, I don't see how he can survive. I know that sounds like we're going for the headline. We're not. I was down there a couple weeks ago, and my pulse of that situation is all the goodwill Billy Napier found in the offseason, and he found a lot, went out the window. There's virtually no confidence in this program without a win. And by the way, that win, a win over Texas A&M doesn't really guarantee anything, except it stops the hemorrhaging, and that's exactly what it is. And the schedule has been known for months now, but even Central Florida in a couple of weeks looks precarious without a win, and then Tennessee. And I mean, the only part of the schedule that got a little bit easier is a home game on the other side of this the second half of the season against Kentucky, because I don't think you know more about Kentucky than I do, having just done their game. But yeah, I mean, we can sugarcoat it all we want, but it's a waste of time. I mean, he better win this game.
Well, I think you said a win doesn't necessarily do anything, but it might say something about A&M. What do you think the reaction would be if A&M now is starting the Mike Elko era 1 and 2?
Well, I think it's really a punch to the gut of a university that just dropped nearly $80 million so they could get rid of the other coach. And I think it's way too early to judge Elko. I think everyone seems to like him. I think he's done a lot of good things, but it just felt like the Notre Dame game got away. Suddenly we look at Notre Dame a little bit differently. And it would say a lot, Greg, because that, Florida by no means is close. It comes close to among the 5 most difficult SEC games that A&M has this year.
Yeah, there's a bunch of tough ones. A lot of them are at home, though, so that's, I think, the silver lining. But still, like you said, this feels like a gotta-have-it situation almost on both sides if you want to salvage a season, and in one particular case, if you want to salvage your job. But we'll see what happens with Billy Napier. Hopefully, things will work out for them regardless of the outcome this weekend. Columbia, South Carolina. I did not expect this to be the epicenter of SEC football this week, with game day heading there and with LSU now heading there. And South Carolina's resurgent performance the last week against Kentucky. And even though they struggled a bit against Old Dominion, that group that we saw last week in person looked like the real deal. So if LSU were to start the season 1 and 2, given the conversation around their program heading into this year as a possible playoff contender, what does that mean for where Brian Kelly's at?
Well, I think it would be a shattering loss, Greg. And I'm a big fan of Brian Kelly, but to have 2 losses by the middle of September would be really hard to handle. LSU fans are great fans, but they're also quick to start asking questions, and they would certainly be asking plenty of them. And LSU has suffered some pretty serious injuries already this season, which doesn't help them. But I think it's another case where, I mean, where we're talking about Florida as a matter of survival, we're talking about LSU as a playoff team. And are they? And they're really on the fringe. They're on the outer fringe of the playoffs. They're in the next group who doesn't make it. But so that's why they have to win because they do have some good home games too. With Alabama and Ole Miss. So I think that gives them Oklahoma, I believe, as well. So that gives them some really good opportunities, but not with another stumble. I felt like they threw away the opportunity against Southern Cal, and they can't do that again.
Yeah, that one was a tough one to stomach, I would imagine, if you are an LSU fan. Another one that's really tough to stomach. I feel like I've been fielding calls on it. I'm sure you've been fielding calls on it. But the reaction right now to what's going on at Auburn is really, really aggressive, to say the least. Calling for people to be replaced, suggesting that things need to be adjusted, and it's just 2 games into year number 2 for Hugh Freeze. So I know that they don't play anybody this week, but how real are the concerns about the uneven nature of Auburn's play in the last 2 years?
They should be real. And for all the good things you can say about this program off the field, the on-the-field performance lately has been terrible. And you go back to New Mexico State, and then the 4th and 31, the complete no-show against Maryland, and now this. I didn't see any way they could lose to Cal. Now that's not showing any respect for any part of the Cal program, but that's just a gut response when somebody says, "Hey, you think Cal can beat Auburn?" The answer is no, and they did. And since then, Hugh Freeze really, everything he's saying is and has said is being interpreted. Is he blaming his players? Because he doesn't seem to be taking too much blame. And I realize every coach mouths the words, Greg, but sometimes you know when they really mean it or not. So he gambled on Peyton Thorne. That's his decision. That's his guy, and he's going to ride with him. And This is not the same situation as Napier. Nobody's firing Hugh Freeze, at least yet. So where this season goes will determine what the offseason looks like. But I do know, and you know, because you spent a lot of time in Alabama, the boys that gave him the job are capable of taking it away if he doesn't start performing.
It is pretty shocking, though, to see, and kind of going back, and something that I had just kind of forgotten, his teams will play up to the best teams. But for whatever reason, there's always a game or two on the schedule that are just flat out unexplainable. And I wonder, too, from Auburn's perspective, like, do they care more about a consistent, solid, they're going to win 10 or 11 a year? Obviously, that's unlikely, given the fact that Auburn, I don't think, has put together back-to-back 10-win seasons in their history. Or do they want their program to be the giant killer? Because if they want them to be the giant killer, Hugh Freeze might be the best man for the job. But consistency is not something that he's experienced, even dating back to his time at Liberty and at Ole Miss.
Auburn fans are very proud. And you know, they take pride in what that football team puts on the field, even in defeat, as painful as that can be. They don't take pride in what we saw Saturday and what we saw in the other games that we've referenced. So I think there's a disconnect right now, and you know, this is coming after a reboot. I mean, there aren't a lot of familiar faces on that coaching staff from a year ago. And some of that is baked into the cake, Greg. I mean, you get the job and people are in your ear, hey, we need you to keep this guy. I much prefer the coach wipe the place out. I've never felt keeping former players or keeping people on the staff for recruiting, because recruiting is so different. This isn't the good old days where it really mattered where you played. It really matters how much money you have right now. So I think he's made some mistakes. His demeanor isn't great either. I've been around Hugh Freeze once or twice down there in interviews. He doesn't really look like he wants to be there. I know that sounds like a bold statement, but I mean, there's something going on with him. I mean, at least act like you want the job. I mean, show some emotion. And Brian Kelly, for all the theatrics of punching the table, at least it looked like he cared. I mean, there are times when I don't really know what Hugh Freeze is up to. It looks like he's okay. I got the job I've always wanted. I was able to bounce back from disaster at Ole Miss. I got the Liberty job. I made the most of it until I mailed it in the last few weeks, and now I've got Auburn. And is this really what I want? I know that sounds like I'm out in left field, but that's my impression of being around Hugh Freeze.
Moving over to the other side of the state, Alabama, shaky performance through three quarters last week. I just think South Florida is a tricky matchup for them. I know a lot of people have kind of jumped to conclusions about what this team could be. Well, I saw them look awful last year, and they rallied and got a lot better as the game went along. They head to Wisconsin this week, a unique road trip, and I think a marquee matchup. Like any team, that to me, I just like Wisconsin's program a lot. Naturally, I like Alabama's program a lot. So when you look at this matchup, knowing how it looked the last time Wisconsin played Alabama in a non-conference game, it was a very one-sided affair. How much will Kalen DeBoer be judged based on his team's performance against this version of Wisconsin?
Well, this is really his first significant national stage. I mean, the first two games, millions of people watched prime time, but they were playing off brands. And I agree with you on the matchup. I mean, South Florida's okay. It's just a weird, so for some reason, it's like in golf. Some really good golfers cannot play some courses. Alabama should never play South Florida again. It's just mysterious. But I expect Alabama to look good. I expect them to bounce back. It's not it's on some weekends this would not be a great matchup, but on this weekend it is a great matchup because there's so few other choices. And it's a real test. Alabama has Georgia now in 2 weeks. So what do they look like in a hostile setting against a really good coach who's got an ascending program? And there was a lot not to like Saturday night against South Florida, but I wouldn't obsess over it. I mean, the one thing that you know from listening to your show Monday and Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever Alabama fans lost money on the game. That's why they're angry. I mean, it just comes down to that. And by the way, I bought into it too. I mean, I don't bet, but I would have bet on Alabama because it just seemed like, hey, they're really good. Let's go with them one more time. And so I think Alabama is in good shape Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they match up there. A couple more teams that are, I don't want to say they're on life support, but this is, hey, put up or shut up time. Let's start with Florida State. They play Mike Norvell's former team in Memphis this week. They're a favorite. I don't want to say they're a healthy favorite, but they're a favorite. And Mike Norvell, after last year, very few coaches did a better job than he did under the circumstances that he did it with. And yet it feels like on the heels of having lost 3 in a row, people are starting to lose their minds. Now, is it necessary for Florida State fans at this moment to press the panic button?
No, because I think the program is still in good hands overall. But this game to me is a lot about Memphis. You and I have both been to Memphis recently, and this is the game that they have circled. This is the game that Memphis can put the flag down and say, okay, hey, we are now one of those group of fives who deserve serious consideration. And with NIU winning, we tended to forget about Memphis a little bit. But I think it's a winnable game. But I also believe Norvell is a superb coach. And even though we can all disagree about the playoffs last year, I think they're fortunate to have him down there.
One other one that I was interested in is the fact that CBS's theme music will be played as the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and Purdue Boilermakers take the field in West Lafayette, which alumnus Gary Danielson will be on the call. To me, it still feels a little awkward to see those matchups centered around the CBS theme, but it is what it is. Marcus Freeman, though, now has lost 3 games as a double-digit favorite. He has lost a bunch of games to unranked teams, and his offense in 29 games as a head coach has scored 21 or less points. What does he need to show you down the stretch to make you feel good about his long-term prospects as the head coach of the Irish?
First of all, I bumped into a CBS game the other day and heard Gary Danielson. I thought to myself, I thought this nightmare was over, but apparently not. So we'll be subjected to him at least one more time, because I am curious about the game. I'll spare you we all love Marcus Freeman because I think everybody that meets him does really respect him a lot. But we're talking Notre Dame here. Something tells me Newt Rockne rolling over in his grave somewhere after that game the other day. And it's that game on top of the other games that you mentioned, the Marshall game, the Stanford game, countless other games. And I just don't – I understand that college football has had a reckoning, and programs just because they don't have a big name can be really good, but it's still Notre Dame. And I know Notre Dame fans love to beat up on Brian Kelly and say all the things that they and take such such glee and ooze out with the Schadenfreude every time Brian Kelly loses. But Brian Kelly has lost to some pretty good teams over his LSU tenure. He hasn't lost to some of the ones that Marcus Freeman has, and also Brian Kelly played for a title and got to the playoffs 2 other times. And until Marcus Freeman gets to the playoffs, these nagging doubts are going to continue and follow him around.
Yeah, they certainly feel fair. Paul, we'll get you out of here with this. A lot of people love to hate the SEC. You field calls from Ann Arbor and Columbus every day. And right now, there's 6 of the top 7 teams in the country, according to the AP, are from the Southeastern Conference. And frankly, it's hard to shoot holes in the top 7 right now. It really is. I don't think there's a team outside of the top 7 that should be in the top 7, outside of maybe Miami, and they sit there at number 10. So looking at those teams with Tennessee at 7, Bama, Missouri, Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, looking at all the teams that currently occupy the top 7, how many do you think can win the national championship? And frankly, Paul, when we fast forward to the end, how many are going to be in that 12-team playoff?
Yeah, what's so interesting, Greg, is 6 of the top 7, and it still feels like a weird year in the SEC because some of everyone after that has had some inexplicable loss, and which is pretty jarring to me. But I still think 4 can get to the playoffs. I think 5 is really a challenge, and I know SEC honks, easy for me to say. Think they all deserve to be in, but I'm trying to be realistic and respectful of the rest of the college, and also think like the committee thinks. And they may say they don't care about conferences, and I tend not to believe much of what they tell us. I still think the 2 that I would take. There's 2 I would take with comfort, and there's one that remains a little bit of a mystery to me that could surprise us all. Obviously, Georgia and Texas seem like maybe they're in a class of their own. The school I can't make up my mind if they're going to play for the title or disappoint us is Ole Miss. They look really flawless right now. I think I would take them as my 3rd team, and then try to sort it all out later with Tennessee and Alabama and Missouri. But that's where I am. I'm going to stay with 4. I know I'm supposed to say 16 schools deserve to be in.
Can't believe you're leaving Vandy out, Paul. They're 2-0.
And this chair I sit in, Greg, you've been in the studio enough times. If you say the wrong thing, you will get ejected out of here.
Fair enough, Paul. Excellent perspective. We appreciate it very much. We look forward to seeing you every day on your show on SEC Network from 3 to 7 Eastern, and then, of course, on SEC Nation on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock Eastern time. Paul, always great. Really appreciate it, buddy.
A great pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, so we want to take a quick second here just to go through and right now give you our top 4 in the Power 4. So we're going to go through every single conference, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC, and tell you right now who the top 4 teams are in that league. Now, this is just a power ranking, I think, and what I think a team might be capable of as they move forward. So it's also a little bit based on strength of record, because it's hard for me to, for example, put Ole Miss in the top 4 in the SEC when they haven't played anybody. So top 4 in the Power 4. We'll start in the SEC. We will put at number 1, much like the AP poll and pretty much universally accepted, the Georgia Bulldogs are the number 1 team right now. But I think that gap between 1 and 2 in the SEC got really close this past weekend with Texas's performance on the road at Michigan. I have Texas at number 2. At number 3, I'm putting the Tennessee Volunteers. Really liked what I see from their defense. Now, offense, a bit of a work in progress, but they have the personnel and the pieces along both the offensive line, at running back, and at wide receiver to make life a little bit easier for Nico Iamaleava. I think he's still a bit of a work in progress, but the ceiling is outrageously high. I'm putting Tennessee at number 3, fresh off their beatdown of NC State. And at number 4, it's the Alabama Crimson Tide. You're going to say, well, they looked really, really rough last week against USF. Fair enough. USF made them look really bad last year, too. This year, the big difference is they ran away from them in the 4th quarter, and that showed growth, I think, from the Crimson Tide. Ole Miss hadn't played anybody. Missouri hadn't played anybody. We will reassess what they do next week after they're tested for the first time against Power 5 competition this upcoming weekend. Let's go next to the Big 10. Ohio State's number 1 by a fairly significant margin. I thought that this league was going to be kind of tight at the top between Ohio State and a former Pac-12 program. I just thought that Pac-12 program would be Oregon. It's not. It's USC. I have USC as the number 2 team right now based on what I saw against LSU. I like their quarterback. I think the defense is significantly improved. They got great weapons on the perimeter. So I think USC right now occupies that number 2 spot. You're going to look at number 3 and you're going to say, hang on a second, how? That would be Penn State. And while Penn State looked terrible on the defensive side of the football in the first half last week against Bowling Green, they figured it out in the second half. They really tightened up their coverage. They were better along the lines of scrimmage. And I still think, based on what I've seen through 2 weeks, I think Penn State is a far more capable offense than they were at any point last year. They're in at number 3 and at number 4, fresh off a beatdown of the Colorado Buffaloes. Nebraska is in the top 4. I love their defensive line. I really love their defensive line. I think back end of their defense is solid. Their quarterback is going to continue to get better. But at this point, you know what he's doing? He's not turning the ball over. Dylan Raiola, for a freshman, not turning it over, not taking unnecessary risk. That was their undoing last year. They turned it over time and time again, which led to defeats. He's not doing that this year. He's distributing the football and looks like he's very poised for the moment to take Nebraska to the next level. So they are in at number 4 in the Big Ten. Let's quickly move to the Big 12. The Big 12 is tough, by the way. You could make a case for like 6 or 7 different teams to be in the top 4. I went with this. Utah at 1, Iowa State. That's right, Iowa State at 2. It's a really good performance in the second half from Rocco Becht. Jalen Noel is a big play threat at wide receiver. So I think with how they performed in the second half against a really good defense of Iowa, made me feel real optimistic about what they might be able to do. They had a lot of production back from last year. Looks like they're poised to make a run there in the Big 12. At number 3, I'm on Oklahoma State. Still have concerns about them on defense, but they played much better in the second half, came back and won that game against Arkansas. And then finally, Kansas State. Avery Johnson still looks like a first-year starter, trying to figure things out right now, but there were some things that were troubling based on what I saw in the game against Tulane. And then finally, moving in the ACC. Also very tough. We know who's at the top. That's Miami. They're at the top, not even by a little bit, too. It's a wide margin. Probably the biggest gap between the number 1 team and the number 2 team currently resides in the ACC. Louisville's at number 2, even though there's still a lot to be learned about Louisville. Clemson, one of the few teams on the list in any of the leagues with a loss, but I liked the bounce back that we got from Appalachian State. And frankly, they're there by a process of elimination. Not overly impressed by the consistency that I'm seeing right now from ACC teams ranked 4 through 10, very up and down. And then at number 4, it's Boston College. We'll see what they're made of this week when they take on the Missouri Tigers. Thank you so much for watching us here at Always College Football. Go find us on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. You can hit that like, rate, and subscribe. It's under the podcast, Always College Football. And then wherever you get your podcast, go ahead and subscribe there as well. Download it, rate it, and absorb the college football information that we're putting out multiple times a week. So for all of us here at Always College Football, thanks for being here. For Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have a great day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.